crafters, are you ready to shake up your spring decor with some unconventional flower crafts? Today we'll be stepping away from traditional bouquets and diving into a world of creativity and unique flower projects that will add a whole new dimension to your space. Hi, my name is Katie from Lady Red Crafting. Let's dive right into our first craft. So I always have leftover pine cones from Christmas, and I wanted to find a way to use them during the spring. So using some clippers, I'm going to go ahead and take apart my pine cone. And when I started doing this, I was making a huge mess, and this will make a big mess, so just be careful when you're doing this. And it took me 2 pine cones to get 3 pieces that looked like flowers. One little trick that I had when I was trying to cut these pine cones is I trimmed a cave around the center of the pine cone, where I just trimmed off some of the little pieces of that pine cone. And I just got my clippers right in there, and it made it a little bit easier to clip these and make sure that they stayed intact. Now let's set these aside for a few minutes and start on our stems. So I'm going to use some of these carrots that I got at the Dollar Tree. I thought that these would be a nice sturdy piece to be able to attach our pine cones to. And using some skewers, I'm just going to put them into my carrots so it'll make it easier for us to paint them. For my first coat of paint, I'm starting out with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Moss. And I was surprised how well the one coat of paint covered on these carrots. While the carrots were drying, I go ahead and I'm going to tape these pine cones down to a paintable surface just so it's a little bit easier to paint them. And I noticed that one of my pine cone flowers had a petal missing, so using one of the pieces of pine cone that I saved from earlier, I just went ahead and hot glued a petal right into place before we started painting. So to paint these pine cones, I'm using the color Plaster from Waverly Chalk Paint and a big round brush, and I'm just going to go ahead and lightly tap all around the pine cone just so that I can get a really nice coat of paint but still be able to see that pine cone coming through. And now I'm going to set these aside to dry while I go back to my stems. So to make these carrots look a little more stem-like, I'm going to add a little bit of my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I'm just going to dab that onto each one of these carrots. So once that has dried, I grab my Apple Barrel English Ivy Green, and I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to dab a little bit of paint all over each one of these carrots to hopefully make these blend in more like a stem. Now to put these little flowers together, all we do is take that cute carrot stem and we're going to add some hot glue to the top and take our pine cone flower and just put those two together. And don't these flowers look amazing? Now let's go ahead and get a pot ready to plant these flowers in. So I got this pot at the Dollar Tree. It's just a cute terracotta pot. And I'm going to use my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster. And all I do is a nice coat of paint on the outside edges of this pot and just slightly down into the inside of the pot. Next, I'm going to cut a little piece of floral foam and we're going to set that inside of our pot just so we have a nice stable surface. Now to figure out the placement of our flowers, I'm just going to stick the flowers into the floral foam and make an imprint on where I want to put the flowers. And then what I'm going to do is actually remove the flowers from the floral foam, and using my wire cutters, I'm just actually digging into the floral foam just so we have a nice spot to put our flowers in. And I add a little bit of hot glue into each one of these holes to keep everything stable, and we'll add back the flowers. So now that we have our flowers planted, I grab some Spanish moss and some hot glue. And all we're going to do is add that Spanish moss around those flowers using the hot glue to keep everything in place. And I love how this is coming together. So for our final step, I'm going to go ahead and hot glue a bow to the front of our pot. And if you'd like to learn how to make this bow, I'll put a link up at the top here to a quick tutorial on that. And now our farmhouse bouquet is ready to display. This is so cute. I love the neutral colors, which goes really well with my decor, but you could also do this in some fun spring colors. I'm excited to show you this piece today. We're starting out with a wood blank from the Dollar Tree, a wood cutout of the word blessed, and a flower hook that I found at the Dollar Tree last spring. We'll start out by going ahead and just removing any hooks and stickers off of our blank, and using some wood glue, I'm going to go ahead and attach the word blessed to the bottom of this sign. I'll use my pink clips to clamp everything down into place. Now, while that is drying, I'm going to go ahead and grab that flower hook that we found from the Dollar Tree. And we're going to remove the hook piece from the back side of the flower. And I'm just using some needle nose pliers to remove everything. That hook was a little bit tougher to remove, but eventually it did come loose. So let's grab our paintable surface and some Waverly chalk paint in the color ink. And I'm going to go ahead and paint some coats of paint over the whole entire flower petals. Was thinking that I might spray paint this, but it was really rainy and windy outside, so I decided not to do that, and I just painted the flower in the house using my Waverly chalk paint instead. I recently became a plaid ambassador, and I got my welcome kit last week, and it came with a crackling medium from Folk Art. So we're going to go ahead and try that out on this flower. And so how you use this is you use this over the top of some chalk paint that is completely dry. And once it is completely dried, go ahead and you put a top coat of this crackling medium over the top and let that completely dry as well. Next, you add another chalk paint over the top of the crackling medium. So I'm going to use my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster to go over the top. While we have a minute, I want to talk a little bit about this playlist I'm a part of this month, Spring Flowers, hosted by Amanda at 6 Kids and a Glue Gun and Brenda from Rustic and Lace DIYs. These ladies do a fantastic job hosting this playlist monthly. And there is a fun playlist listed in my description box that I think you guys should all check out. There's these wonderful creators that are doing fun things with spring flowers this month. Plus, I've linked Amanda and Brenda down there, so please check them out and give them some love. Thank you. So I have to tell you, I am totally in wow of how this is turning out. After I started painting the plaster paint over the top of this crackling medium, the crackles started to form, and these just look amazing. Now, I've done the crackling with the Elmer's glue before, and that turns out really well, but it's a little bit more touchy than this. This is very forgiving, and it works really well. I recommend trying it if you want to try something new. It's a crackling medium by Folk Art, and I will put a link of it in my description box below if you'd like to check it out. So while we're in the spirit of trying new things, I'm going to also try out this vintage teal chalk paint by Folk Art, and I'm going to paint the front side of this wood sign. After the first coat, it did look like this, so I did paint a second coat over the top of this teal paint. And since we had so much fun using this crackling medium on our flower, I want to use this on the sign as well. So we're going to go ahead and just paint a nice coat of the crackling medium over the top of this sign. And once our crackling medium has completely dried, I grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and we're going to paint a nice coat of paint over the top of the crackling medium. And wow, this crackling medium is amazing. This turned out so nice. Here is what it starts to look like, and you can just see that blue kind of fading through. And what I'm going to do once everything is dry here is I grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color ink, and I'm just going to lightly brush around the letters to make the blessed stand out a little bit more on this sign. Now, once the paint has completely dried, I went ahead and I grabbed some of this really thin black ribbon, and I'm using some Scotch tape, and I'm just going to kind of make like a little shoelace on the end of that ribbon, so it makes it easier for me to be able to pull that through on my sign. Now, once we get that ribbon pulled through, I'll flip the sign over onto the back side, and I'm just going to tie a few knots there to make sure that it stays in place and doesn't pull through. Then I just trim that Scotch tape right off, and I repeat it on the other side. I lay the sign out flat, and I go ahead and I tie the top two ribbons together just so we have a nice way to hang this sign. Now let's add some embellishments to our sign. First, let's go back to the flower that we made earlier. And I have this thumbtack that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to take my pliers and remove the thumbtack sharp piece from that. And we're going to use this as a little button in the center of our flower, so I'm just going to hot glue that right down in the center there. Now, going back to our sign, I wanted to fill the holes in where the ribbon is coming out of the sign. So I took my hodgepodge metal kit that I had from Stampin' Up! From about, 15, 20 years ago, and I found some brads that I'm going to use in those holes. So I'm just going to stick those in using a little bit of hot glue to help keep them in place. And they actually were able to go through, and I was able to fold them out like a normal brad on the back side as well. Now, this step is completely optional. This was just purely a decorative thing that I wanted to do for my sign. Now, for the last step on this sign, I'm taking some hot glue, and I'm going to hot glue the flower above the word blessed. And the sign turns out fantastic. I love how its unique farmhouse design is just so classy. And I want to say a quick thank you to all my current subscribers. Thank you so much for subscribing. And if you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting that subscribe button below. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. So I see these boxes at the Dollar Tree all the time, and I wanted to try using this in a different way than I normally would. And in my craft stash, I had these cute little bottles from Halloween. And I thought when I picked them up at Halloween, I could use them some other time during the year. And this is one of those times. So I'm going to start out by removing the labels off of these little bottles. Once I get what I can removed from the bottles, I take the lids off the bottles, and I'm going to grab some of this Goo Gone, and I'm just going to wipe the bottles clean and make sure that all the sticky residue is removed from these little cute bottles. Back over to our box, we're going to put that on top of a paintable surface, and using our Waverly chalk paint in the color Truffle, we're going to paint the exterior of this box. And I want to paint the backside and all of the edges of this box. And once our paint has completely dried, I grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I'm going to paint the inside of this box. Now, for the frame on the outside of this box, I'm just going to dry brush with the Plaster color paint over the top of that Truffle paint. Moving back to those little bottles we had earlier, I grabbed 3 of these bottles, and we're going to use 3 in our project. I take my painter's tape, and I'm setting that bottle right on top of the painter's tape so it cannot move around, which will make it a lot easier to tie a ribbon around these little bottles. Next, I'm taking some white ribbon, and we're just going to tie a basic bow to the top of this bottle. And once we have our bow just right, we'll do a quick dovetail. And these turn out so cute. And now let's repeat that for the other 2 bottles. Even though we're only using 3 of the bottles, I am going to use all 4 of the lids that I had from the original package of bottles. And these little cork lids we're going to use as a little stand on the bottom of this box. And I'm just going to hot glue that onto the bottom. Now I'm going to grab my spool of twine and we're going to take that and wrap that around the top part of this little box. And I'm using some hot glue to start my twine on the back side and just going to randomly wrap around the top half of this box. And when we're done wrapping the twine around the box, I am going to use a little bit of hot glue to keep everything in place. Now let's hot glue a twine bow to our twine. Now I found this greenery at the Dollar Tree and it has some little purplish pink flowers on the top of these. And I'm taking my flower cutters and I'm just going to go ahead and cut those flowers off of our pick. And next we're going to add those flowers to our cute little jars that we made up. Now once we are satisfied with our little bouquets, I'm going to grab this super glue tape that I got from the Dollar Tree. What we're going to do is just cut 3 little pieces to put on the bottom piece of each one of these jars. And I find that this is a little bit easier to use when we're trying to place these jars into the box because I didn't want them to spill over, the glue to get everywhere. So I thought this would just be a lot easier to make everything stay into place. So now that we have our tape on the bottom of these jars, all we need to do is place them into this cute little display. And now that we have our bouquets in place, this is the most adorable little display that you can put on a tiered tray or would look fabulous on a shelf. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button below. And for more crafting fun, check out this video. Until next time, please remember, craft more, stress less.